Hello, guys. I'm Endragh, continuing with more Color of Magic, the wonderfulness. Last time we just started traveling, more talking about the gods. We found out about a few of them: Blind Io, Arthur the crocodile god, Fate, and the lady, capital T H E, capital Lady. Why? I had to think about this lady for a second. So the lady. Um, you'll find out more about her later, I promise. Anyways, I'm gonna continue reading now. Once I put my bookmark down, so I don't lose it. Okay. Okay, yeah. There was a faint sound, hardly louder than the noise of the bees in the rosemary by the road. It had a curiously bony quality, as of rolling skulls or a whirling box dice. Rincewind peered around. There was no one nearby. For some reason, that worried him. Then came a slight breeze that grew and went in the space of a few heartbeats. It left the world unchanged, save in a few interesting particles. There was now, for example, a 5-meter tall troll standing in the road. It was exceptionally angry. This was partly because trolls generally are, in any case, but it was exasperated by the fact that the sudden and instantaneous teleportation from its lair in the Ramrock Mountains 3,000 miles away and 1,000 yards closer to the rim had its internal temperatures to a dangerous level. In accordance with the law of conservation of energy, conservation? Yeah, of energy, so it bared its fangs and charged. What a strange creature, Twoflower remarked. Is it dangerous? That's way too high for Twoflower, sorry. Is it dangerous? Only to people, shouted Rincewind. He drew his sword and, with a smooth overarm throw, completely failed to hit the troll. The blade plunged on into the hearth at the side of a trunk. There was the faintest of sounds, like the rattle of old teeth. The sword struck a boulder concealed in the hearth. Concealed, a watcher might have considered, so artfully that a moment before it had not appeared to be there at all. It sprang up like a leaping salmon, and in mid ricoche plunged deeply into the back of the troll's grey neck. The creature grunted, and with one swing of a claw gouged a wound in the flank of Twoflower's horse, which screamed and bolted into the trees at the roadside. The troll spun around and made a grab for Rincewind. Then its sluggish nervous system brought it the news that it was dead. It looked surprised for a moment, and then toppled over and shattered into gravel. Trolls being semicolous life forms, their bodies reverted instantly to stone at the moment of death. Arg! Thought Rincewind, as his horse reared in terror. He hung on desperately as it staggered two legs. He hung on desperately as it staggered two-legged across the road, and then, screaming, turned and galloped into the woods. The sound of hoof belts died away, leaving the air to the hum of bees and the occasional rattle of butterfly wings. There was another sound, too, a strange noise for the bright time of noonday. It sounded like dice. Yeah. Rincewind? The long aside of trees threw Twoflower's voice from side to side, and eventually tossed it back to him, unheeded. He sat down on a rock and tried to think. Firstly, he was lost. That was vexing, but it did not worry him unduly. The forest looked quite interesting, and probably held elves or gnomes, perhaps both. In fact, on a couple of occasions, he had thought he had seen strange green faces peering down at him from the branches. Twoflower had always wanted to meet an elf. In fact, what he had wanted to meet was a dragon, but an elf would do, or a real goblin. His luggage was missing, and that was annoying. It was also starting to rain. He squirmed uncomfortably on the damp stone and tried to look on the bright side. For example, during its mad dash, his plunging horse had burst through some bushes and disturbed a she-bear with her cubs, but had gone on before the bear could react. Then it had suddenly been galloping over the sleeping bodies of a large wolf pack, and again its mad speed had been such that the furious yelping had been left far behind. Nevertheless, the day was wearing on, and perhaps it would be a good idea, Twoflower thought, not to hang about in the open. Perhaps there was a... He racked his brain, trying to remember what sort of accommodations forests traditionally offered. Perhaps there was a gingerbread house or something? The stone really was uncomfortable. Twoflower looked down, and for the first time noticed the strange carvings. It looked like a spider, or was it a squid? Moss and lichen rather blurred the precise details, but they didn't blur the runes carved below it. Twoflower could read them clearly, and they said, "Traveler, the hospital temple of Bel Shamhoreth lies 1,000 paces hubward." Now this was strange, Twoflower realized, because although he could read the message, the actual letters were completely unknown to him. Somehow, the message had arrived in his brain without the tedious necessity of passing through his eyes. He stood up and untied his now biteable horse from a sapling. He wasn't sure which way the hub lay, but there seemed to be an old track of sorts leading away between the trees. This Shamhoreth seemed prepared to go out of his way to help stranded travelers. In any case, it was that or the wolves. Twoflower nodded decisively. It is interesting to note that, several hours later, a couple of wolves who were following Twoflower's scent arrived in the glade. Their green eyes fell on the strange 8-legged carving, which may indeed have been a spider, or an octopus, or may yet again have been something altogether more strange, and they immediately decided that they weren't so hungry at that. What? As that? Their green eyes fell on the strange 8-legged carving, and they immediately decided that they weren't so hungry at that. Okay. Adjusting myself again. I do that a lot. I need to because of death coming back. Okay. 3 miles away, a failed wizard was hanging by his hands from a high branch in a birch beech tree. This was the end result of 5 minutes of crowded activity. First, an enraged she-bear had barged through the undergrowth and taken the throat out of his horse with one swipe of her paw. Then, as Rincewind had fled the carnage, he had run into a glade in which a number of irate wolves were milling about. His instructors at Unseen University who had despaired of Rincewind's inability to master levitation, would have then been amazed at the speed with which he reached and climbed the nearest tree, without apparently touching it. Now there was just the matter of the snake. It was large and green, and wound itself along the branch with reptilian patience. Rincewind wondered if it was poisonous, then chided himself for asking such a silly question. Of course it would be poisonous. "What are you grinning for?" he asked the figure on the next branch.
"I can't help it,"
said Death.
"Now, would you be so kind as to let go? I can't hang around all day."
"I can," said Rincewind defiantly. The wolves clustered around the base of the tree, looked up with interest at their next meal, talking to himself.
It won't hurt,
said Death. If words had weight, a single sentence from Death would have anchored a ship. Rincewind's arm screamed with agony at him. He scowled at the vulture-like, slightly transparent figure. "Won't hurt?" he said. "Being torn apart by wolves won't hurt?" He noticed another branch crossing his dangerously narrowing one a few feet away. If he could just reach it. He swung himself forward, one hand outstretched. The branch, already bending, did not break. It simply made a wet little sound and twisted. Rincewind found that he was now hanging onto the end of a tongue of bark and fiber, lengthening as it peeled away from the tree. He looked down, and with a sort of fatal, fatal satisfaction, realized that he would land right on the biggest wolf. Now he was moving slowly as the bark peeled back in longer and longer strips. The snake watched him thoughtfully. But the growing length of bark held. Rincewind began to congratulate himself until he looked up. He saw what he had hitherto not noticed. There was the largest hornet's nest he had ever seen, hanging right in his path. He shut his eyes tight. Why the troll? He asked himself. Everything else is just my usual bad luck, but why the troll? What the heck is going on? Click! It might have been a twig snapping, except that the sound appeared to be from inside Rincewind's head. Click, click! And a breeze that failed to set a single leaf tremble. Click, click! And a breeze that failed to set a single leaf a-tremble. The hornet's nest was ripped from the branch as the strip passed by. It shot past the wizard's head, and he watched it grow smaller as it plummeted towards the circle of and he watched it grow smaller as it plummeted towards the circle of upturned muzzles. The circle suddenly closed. The circle suddenly expanded. The concerted yelp of pain as the pack fought to escape the furious cloud echoed among the trees. Rincewind grinned inanely. Rincewind's elbow nudged something. It was the tree trunk. The strip had carried him right to the end of the branch, but there were no other branches. The smooth bark beside him offered no handholds. It offered hands, though. Two were even now thrusting through the mossy bark beside him, slim hands, green as young leaves. Then a sudden arm followed. Then the Hamdray leaned right out and grasped the astonished wizard firmly, and, with that vegetable strength that can send roots questing into rocks, drew him into the tree. The solid bark parted like a mist, and then closed like a clam. Death watched impassively. He glanced at the cloud of mayflies that were dancing their joyful zigzag near. He glanced at the cloud of mayflies that were dancing their joyful zigzags near his skull. He snapped his fingers. The insects fell out of the air, but somehow it wasn't quite the same. That's the second time he's escaped death, by the way. That's a thing. All right. Blind Io pushed his stack of chips across the table, glowering through such of his eyes that were currently in the room, and strolled out. A few demigods tittered. At least Orphle had taken the loss of a perfectly good troll with precise, if somewhat reptilian grace. The lady's last opponent shifted his seat until he faced her across the board. Lord, she said politely. Lady, he acknowledged. Their eyes met. He was a taciturn god. Taciturn? It was said that he had arrived in the Discworld after some terrible and mysterious incident in another eventuality. It is, of course, the privilege of gods to control their apparent outward form, even to other gods. The fate of the Discworld was currently a kindly man in late mid-age, graying hair brushed nearly around features that a maiden would confidently proffer a glass of small beer to, should they appear at her back door. It was a face a kind youth would gladly help over a stile, except for his eyes, of course. No deity can disguise the manner and the nature of his eyes. The nature of the two eyes of fate. The nature of the two eyes of the fate of the Discworld was this: that while at a mere glance they were simply dark, a closer look would reveal too late. Okay, that's a weird spot for that. that they were not they were that they were but holes opening onto a darkness so remote, so deep that the watcher would feel himself inexuberantly drawn into the twin pools of infinite night, and that their terrible wheeling stars. The lady coughed politely, and laid 21 white chips on the table. Then from her robe she took another chip, silvery and translucent, and twice the size of the others. The souls of a true hero always finds a better rate of exchange, and is valued highly by the gods. Fate raised an eyebrow. "And no cheating, lady," he said. "But who could cheat fate?" she asked. He shrugged. "No one, yet everyone tries. And yet, again, I believe I felt you giving me a little assistance against the others? Of course, so that the end game could be the sweeter, lady. And now." He reached into his gaming box and brought forth a piece, settled it down on the board with a satisfied air. The watching deities gave a collective sigh. Even the lady was momentarily taken aback. It was certainly ugly. The carving was uncertain, as if the craftsman's hands were shaking in horror of the thing taking shape under his reluctant fingers. It seemed to be all suckers and tentacles and mandibles, the lady observed, and one great eye. I thought such as he died out at the beginning of time," she said. "Mayhaps our neurotic friend was loathed even to the near. Mayhaps our neurotic friend was loath either to go near this one," laughed Fate. He was enjoying himself. "It should never have been spawned. Nevertheless," said Fate nomadically. He scooped the dice into their unusual box, and then glanced up at her. "Unless," he added, "you wish to resign?" She shook her head. "Play," she said. "You can match my stakes? Play." Rincewind knew what was inside trees. Wood, sap, possibly squirrels. Not a palace. Still, the cushion underneath him were definitely softer than wood. The wine in the wooden cup beside him was much tastier than sap, and there could be absolutely no comparison between a squirrel and the girl sitting before him, clasping her knees and watching him thoughtfully, unless mention was made of a certain hint of furriness. The room was high, wide, and lit with a soft yellow light which came from no particular source that Rincewind could identify. Through gnarly and knotted archways he could see other rooms, and what looked like a very large winding staircase. And it had looked a perfectly normal tree from the outside too. The girl was green, flesh green. Yeah. Yeah, I know this is Rincewind could be absolutely certain about that, because all she was wearing was a medallion around her neck. Her long hair had a faintly mossy look about it. Her eyes had no pupils and were a luminescent green. Rincewind wished he had paid more attention to anthropology lectures at university. She had said nothing, apart from indicating the couch and offering him the wine. She had said nothing. Apart from indicating the couch and offering him the wine, she had done no more than sit watching him, occasionally rubbing a deep scratch on her arm. Rincewind hurriedly recalled that a dryad was so linked to her tree that she suffered wounds in sympathy. "Sorry about that," he said quickly. "It was just an accident. I mean, there were these wolves, and you had to climb my tree, and I rescued you," said the dryad smoothly. "How lucky for you, and for your friend, perhaps." "Friend?" "The little man with the magic box," said the dryad. "Oh, sure, him," said Rincewind vaguely. "Yeah, I hope he's okay. He needs your help." "He usually does. Did he make it to a tree too?" "He made it to the temple of Bel Shamaroth." Rincewind choked on his wine. His eyes tried to crawl into his head in terror of the syllables they had just heard. The Soul Eater! Before he could stop them, the memories came galloping back. Once, while a student of practical magic at Unseen University, and for a bet, He slipped into the little room off the main library, the room with walls covered in protective lead pentagrams, the room no one was allowed to occupy for more than 4 minutes and 32 seconds, which was a figure arrived at after 200 years of cautious experimentation. He had gingerly opened the book, which was chained to the octagon pedestal in the middle of the ruin-strewed floor. Not lest someone steal it, but lest it escape, for it was the Octova, so full of magic that it had its own vague sentience. One spell had indeed leapt from the crackling pages and lodged itself in the dark recesses of his mind. And, apart from knowing that it was one of the eight great spells, no one would know which one until he said it. Even Rincewind did not, but he could feel it sometimes, sliding out of sight behind his ego, biding its time. Okay, so that's a spell stuck in his head. It's also the reason he can't learn other spells, because they all are scared of that one spell. So he's chilling out with a dryad, and I guess Twoflower has gone to some place that's owned by the Soul Eater, and Fate and Lady are playing. If you couldn't guess, Lady's character, hold on, I'll get the right how I said it. Hold on. Where is it? I had to go a few pages. Yep, that's more. Where is it? I saw it before. I even read it before. Oh wait, one more. There you go. A wandering wizard and some sort of clerk were, Rincewind, a wandering wizard, and some sort of clerk, Twoflower. So yeah, the ladies' pieces are Rincewind and Twoflower, and everyone else's pieces are randoms, except the Soul Eaters is Fates. So we'll see how that goes next time, hopefully. I don't know how far I'm going to get in that section, but yeah, so, bad times are coming now, because Fate and the lady wanted to play games, because they were bored. Anyways, I've been Endragh. This has been Color of Magic. I hope I brought a smile to your face, and I will see you tomorrow night. Night, night, guys.